This will be the beginning of the end of dollar dominance in the world. This is something that until exactly a few months ago, none of us would expect to happen in this decade. We were saying, okay, maybe after 2030 or maybe after 2040. And now we can even see the possibility of this thing happening within the next 2 or 3 years, by 2025, in fact. I myself learned on the ground working in all over Eurasia for the past 22 years. I followed the war of terror by the Americans everywhere. In Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Syria, in Iran, where they're trying to attack, in Iraq, of course, the second Iraq war, everywhere. I was in Afghanistan, in the tribal areas of Pakistan, Afghanistan, even before 9/11 happened. So I had instinctively, my professional self was telling me, you have to go there because this is where the action is. Of course, I didn't know what would happen next, obviously, you know. When I interviewed Commander Massoud in Afghanistan, that was in August 2001. Then I came back to Peshawar, and I learned that the Americans were trying to come up with something to get Osama bin Laden inside Afghanistan. And then a few days later, they assassinated Commander Massoud on September 9. And 2 days later was 9/11. So I was beyond privileged professionally I was there even before the whole thing happened. And obviously, while you are in the middle of all that, you cannot see, you are always asking yourself, where is this going? How come they basically started a war against the whole of Islam? Their war is not against Afghans or Iraq. No, they are fighting the whole of Islam. In fact, this is completely crazy. What do they plan to achieve with that? They are alienating, 1.5 billion people all over the world for what? Little did we know that this was the wrong war, that they picked the wrong war, and they forgot about the two ones that really matter in international relations, Russia and China. So what was happening in between? China was growing, modernizing itself, and Russia was trying to recover from the 1990s when they were devastated by basically neoliberalism imposed by the Americans. So when the Americans wake up, not that they really woke up. So everything that they did for these past 22 years was completely absurd and meaningless. And obviously, because they are too proud of themselves, they will never recognize that they made a major mistake in everything, strategically, tactically, in terms of how they treated their own population inside the US, how they treated their allies, how they treated the rest of the world, how they treated Islam. Everything was wrong. And now it's too late to catch up. So what do they come up with? Okay, let's try a war against Russia in Ukraine, and let's try to think about a war against China because of Taiwan. Very clever, isn't it? So this means that they never learn. These people never learn. So I got taught many lessons, and I'm really grateful for what? For the flow of history to keep teaching me all the time. In fact, all of us who have been following international relations these past 10, 20 years, we could never imagine that only in the space of the past 2 or 3 months, revolution that we had in the system, it's something unimaginable. And of course, it's due to the way the Chinese and the Russians are coordinating at the highest level, but it's also due to how the empire is completely, they blocked themselves in, and they cannot get out. So they trapped themselves with their acts, with their rhetoric, with their warmongering, antagonizing, especially not only Russia and China, but half of the global South, at least, if not more. Basically, this is the construction of a different system to what we have been living since the end of the Second World War, which is a unilateral system controlled by the hegemonic power, the United States. They designed the rules immediately after the end of the Second World War. They implement the rules. They change the rules when they want it. They impose the rules to the global south and to the rest of the world, including their allies in Europe. And what are they doing now? They are weaponizing Poland to make Poland the leader of the future leader, the future in prospect leader of the EU. And with around Poland, a lot of Eastern European nations. This is what the Americans want, especially because Poland is a very complicated matter, because there's a lot of resentment about the empire that they lost in the 17th, 18th century. They hate Ukrainians, they hate Russians, they hate everybody. So it's a perfect country to be manipulated by the US from afar. We're not saying that this is going to happen. This is essentially the American plan B for Europe, because they see that France, sooner or later, France now may contemplate a more independent position inside the European Union, which is something extremely difficult because the EU and the European Commission, they control everything. This implies that they need to control geopolitics all over the planet, of course, and also geoeconomics. But their notion of geoeconomics is very restrictive. It means we choose our trading partners, we impose the rules of trade, they have to follow what we impose. Everything is subordinated to international financial system, which we control. And if you don't agree with that, it's very simple. We can bomb you, we can sanction you. So it's a completely unilateral system. And economically, it's based on the best definition is of a casino. So the United States runs the casino. So as we know, when you go to a casino, there's that famous saying that the house always wins. And the house, 99% they win. Sometimes they they let one or two customers get out with you pieces of gold, let's put it this way. The thing is now, not only Russia and China, but very important players in the global south, they're saying, no, we don't agree with that anymore. It's very difficult because this is a process. And I would say that the hard part started just now. Real multipolarity means everyone has a say, everyone will be on the table, and we're not going to have a hegemon ruling over everybody else. We're going to have middle rank and high rank powers talking to each other, and also incorporating smaller powers and smaller nations as well, which is the case of Africa, for instance, which is not even represented in the UN Security Council. And the way a multipolar world could be configured with a different financial system, without casino capitalism, without an hegemonic power imposing rules, and with everybody sitting at the table and having common decisions, is something that all of them will have to work for. So multipolarity will be what we are starting to live now, how to design the rules of a new system. It's an extremely complex process, which is going to take years, if not decades, but it has already started. And the great thing now, compared to the past, is that we have a set of multilateral organizations that will be coordinating this drive towards the multipolar world. Example, BRICS, which soon will become BRICS Plus, with more new members like Iran, Argentina, Algeria. There are over 20 countries who are on the list and they want to be part of BRICS. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, very, very important, led by Russia and China, where we're going to have Iran as a permanent member starting this year, 2023. Saudi Arabia already said, look, we want to get in as soon as possible. So they have to study how they are going to incorporate Saudi Arabia and others who want to be part of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Once again, it's very complicated, but we have already, let's say, inside the Eurasian Economic Union, inside BRICS, who are already working on how we're going to come up with different payment systems, that they already exist. So this is where we are at the moment. Is like a high-speed train that has already left the station. There is a Chinese payment system, there is a Russian payment system, there is an Iranian payment system, and that's where we get to this alternative currency backed by commodities and gold or both, which Russia and China have in spades, of course, both, and how they're going to seduce, let's put it this way, or convince countries inside BRICS, inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to start adopting. And then it's going to be a cascade. Africans are going to get on board, Latin Americans are going to get on board, etc. So this is very, very important. It starts with trade in bilateral trade in their own currencies of the two countries involved. There are many problems. I'll just mention one of them. For instance, the BRICS Development Bank, the NDB, housed in Shanghai and now led by former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. Dilma said a few days ago that the plan is to have 30% of the business transacted through the NDB outside of the dollar by 2026. This is very, very slow. It should be this year, 2023 already. But you see, it's a very complicated process. It's a long-term process. The problem will be how to coordinate all that in the next stage with a currency that could be accepted by many different countries and in many different continents. So how to coordinate them, expand these payment systems outside of the West, and at the same time design one currency or perhaps a basket of currencies backed by commodities and gold and independent from the US dollar. And of course, in terms of loans, if loans come from China, they will be in yuan, and then they will be repaid later in yuan as well. But there are many countries that get their loans in US dollars or in euros. So how are you going to transact all that back to currencies of the BRICS members? And especially now that we're going to have BRICS plus members, right? President Putin said something very, very important, that the Russians will support trade in yuan with other nations outside of the Russian sphere as well, like in Latin America and Africa. This is very, very important. This means that we can have a situation, for instance, where Russia and Brazil would be trading, and the trade could be in yuan instead of rubles and reals. We have something that was unimaginable until, 1 month ago. ASEAN, the 10 nations of Southeast Asia, they are starting to discuss how to bypass the dollar and trade in their own currencies. The Thai baht, the Singapore dollar, the Malaysian ringgit, etc., Indonesian rupee, which would make absolutely total sense for all of them. And on top of it, when they trade with China, because of all 10 ASEAN members, their number one trade partner, who is it? China. So they should trade in yuan. So this is the part of the trip of our high-speed rail train that's already advancing very, very fast. One thing that would and will accelerate this process exponentially, and myself and other analysts, we consider that this is going to be the key moment when it happens. Will be the day when a Chinese delegation arrives in Riyadh. They have a meeting with Mohammed bin Salman, and they say, okay, from now on, everything that we buy from you, we're going to pay in yuan. And Mohammed bin Salman is going to say, yes, I agree completely. He's already giving hints that this is going to happen one day or another. This will be the beginning of the end of dollar dominance in the world. This is something that until exactly a few months ago, none of us would expect to happen in this decade. We were saying, okay, maybe after 2030 or maybe after 2040. And now we can even see the possibility of this thing happening within the next 2 or 3 years, by 2025, in fact, because the process of Saudi Arabia finally saying to the Americans, bye-bye, what we had before is not going to happen anymore, because it doesn't help us. And we are hopping on the high-speed rail Eurasia train led by Russia and China. This is basically what Mohammed bin Salman is acting like. The new world is being forged in Eurasia. We have to attach ourselves to it, otherwise we're going to be left in the dustbin of history. China may do, in terms of solving absolutely intractable conflicts all over the world, in fact. They delivered in one of the most difficult dossiers of the century, which was Iran and Saudi Arabia. They were kept apart artificially by the Americans for decades, since the Iranian Revolution, in fact, for over 40 years. And the whole thing disappeared with one handshake. One handshake, that's all it takes. The Chinese coordinated the whole reapproximation process with the culmination that was one of the most extraordinary international relations events of this century, this young century. You have the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia, foreign minister of Iran, shaking their hands in Beijing. Of course, all that coordinated by China. So this, in terms of a diplomatic victory for China, was beyond priceless. Why? Because everyone in the Persian Gulf understood the message. Everyone in West Asia understood the message, and everyone in the global South understood the message. So if you don't want war of terror, not war on terror, war of terror, which is what the United States has been practicing since 9/11, nonstop. If you don't want sanctioning, if you don't want non-stop criticism of everything you do in your foreign policy, if you don't want to be excluded from the international financial system, which is they try to do with Iran, they're trying to do with Russia, that's it. You know, you go for diplomacy. The Chinese have at least 3,000 years experience in the matter, and this is, look at what they just accomplished. So if you talk to somebody in Argentina or in Somalia, they will understand intrinsically. They look at the picture and they get it immediately. You don't even need to explain it. You know, we see a movement towards abandoning the unipolar world that is getting more solid by the day. And in deeds, in facts, in deeds, in numbers, of course, in actions, and of course, in terms of the rest of the world, apart from the 13% that constitute the global north, they are understanding, even instinctively, if they don't understand the details, that now is the time to start moving towards a different world, a multipolar world. So this means this is now a global project, basically rejecting the system of these past 75 or 77 years, striving for a more equitable, just, equal partnership and prosperity for everybody kind of world, not subjected to unilateralism, not guided by the logic of war, which is what we had for the past decades, where the hegemonic power basically is at war all the time against somebody or against a bunch of somebodies or against a lot of somebodies. No, the global South wants prosperity, wants trade, development, education, sustainable development for all of them, including the poorest nations. They should have a shot at being developed. And the progress that has been made only in the past few months, you have to keep this momentum. And the momentum is now. And the momentum towards de-dollarization, the momentum towards basically even laughing about the stupidities that come from Washington every day, the momentum of saying, no, we're not going to follow your diktats everywhere, and diversifying their economies, trading in their own currencies, in terms of trade and connectivity. So we see a change of paradigm in global terms, in terms of most of the world finally waking up that the time for change is now. So this is the most important, I would say this is the most important development of our young 21st century.